I actually very much liked your definition of the secularism, the individual Islam, and socially engineered Islam. Also Islam in power in society. They were all beautifully explained. Thank you. Dr. Shajareh, a couple of times you utilized the term authentic Islam. I guess it could be used against socially engineered Islam. Would you please explain about this authenticity versus socially engineered Islam first? And secondly, nowadays we see a lot of people are calling themselves as Muslims. A lot of systems and regimes in the countries, they are calling themselves as Islamic regimes or Islamic systems, be it Iran, be it Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. Even be it extremist groups like Taliban, ISIS, and you name it. How do you see this multiplicity?
Well, I mean, of course, anybody who says La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah and believes in the finality of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is Muslim. But what sort of social engineered Islam to serve a particular purpose is what we are talking about. And when we go back even at the time of Yazid, and indeed before that, the tyrants of yesteryears always try to sort of take a part of the deen and the religion and leave the other parts. So, when it comes to rituals, prayers, this sort of thing, they say, okay, you could do that. That's not a problem. I don't have a problem with that. But don't try to bring social justice. Don't try to actually say people have got rights. And don't try to interfere in the tyrant's ability to rule and abuse others. And the minute you do that, they try to sort of social engineer. The reason they social engineer, again, going back to what is not a secret, that sort of think tanks, which were there to sort of address the danger of Islam, authentic Islam, they came up with, look, you can't destroy it from outside, so you have to actually social engineer a form of Islam that, to replace it. And as I said earlier, Bush, Blair, Cameron, leaders of most of these colonial or new colonial systems have always come up saying that this is not Islam. I know what Islam is. Islam is this, this, this. And the Islam that they're presenting is Islam that doesn't challenge injustice. Is Islam that doesn't challenge taghut. So really, if you want to do very simplicity and say that what is Islam and what is social engineered Islam, then we have to go back to the Quranic verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I created Islam as a deen, as a way of life, and if you follow my commands and implement what I have said in the way I have said it, then you are victorious and you are doing the best as a human being to create an environment where you could live and flourish. But if you going to abandon that and go for taghut, which is man-made ideas and structure, then that is not Islam. So Islam is submission to the will of Allah as is being defined in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, and is being established. So once you're following that fully, then you are following Islam. Anything else is not Islam. And this is what those who actually want to go back to the deen of Allah of always saying. Simplicity is that to follow the deen of Allah, to follow the command of Allah as a means of living your life in a full potential of it. As one very said it, somebody said it in a very simple way, as Allah has created us, as someone who creates and makes cars in a factory. When you get a car being created or made in a factory, then you get a manual. And this manual tells you where to put oil, where to put petrol, how much pressure you put in the tires, and it gives you a certain guidelines how to use this car to its full potentials. Now, if you ignore that and you put the oil in the place of gas and gas in the place of oil, and you put less temperature and you model this, then one thing is for sure, you are not going to use the full potential of that car. And human beings is also, the Quran and the Sunnah is the manual of how to live. And Allah who created us has given us this manual, and He knows best what manual you need to actually come to your full potential. And once you follow that, you're following Islam. If you do anything else, you're damaging yourself and you're not able to use your full potential. Now, in the history, there are always people who want to divert you from that path. And while people are those who actually have committed themselves to the deen, as Allah refers to them as believers in the Quran, are following the deen of Allah, and this is the separation. So in simplicity, full commitment and full appliance to the way of Allah is Islam, and creating your own laws to divert you from that path is Taghut.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Shajareh. Then, how can a person who is seeking to get to know Imam Hussein find the right path between the American or British Islam and the authentic Islam?
Well, it's the different values. You see, I think what is it the human being wants to achieve? If you're following the deen of Allah, you're following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you're following the commands of the Quran on how to be pious, how to cleanse yourselves from ills and razzmatazz of this world, how to stay fast for your achieving your goal for the Akhirah. And this is a path. But if you are trying to leave that as a goal and not able to concentrate on what you are trying to achieve, then you get diverted. And this is as true in life in other hemisphere as it is religiously. Now, the point is this, that I think the concept of resistance comes in. See, when you look at all the prophets, as I was saying earlier on, they resisted, they spoke truth to power, they stood with the oppressed, they did not stand with the powerful and the rich and the famous. They stood up in support of those who were downtrodden by the authorities and the Taghut of their time. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam was part of that resistance. As a matter of fact, when you look at all our A'immah, they were all resisting. As a matter of fact, the reason they became all shaheed was because they resisted against the taghut of their time. And they didn't all take the sword as Imam Hussein did, but they were part of the resistance of their time. Not part of it, they actually were the leader of resistance of their time. And when you look at even those who were captured and put in dungeons, in prisons, dungeons, and they had no control over anything, they still were feared by the taghut of their time, and they even were killed while they were in dungeons because they couldn't even, they were so fearful of them that they couldn't even accept them being in dungeons and under their control. So what you then come up with and see that the only conclusion you could have is that Islam and Nabi Muhammadi is part of the resistance against injustice and the taghut of your time, to the extent that you actually make sacrifice your life. We have some people who they think. I mean, I'm not sure they really are evil or anything. And I think most times there's not an issue of bad intention or evil intention, but they think that the taghut of time could be manipulated. You could even become friends with it. You could manipulate it. You could actually use hikmah or certain sort of intelligence and so forth, and you could actually sort of get close to them and then change them, or be a moment, but in the same time friendly to taghut and be part of the taghut traditions and so forth. Now that's not possible, because if that was possible, then prophets would have done that. If that was possible, then our Aimma would have done that, because they were much smarter than me and you. They were much more capable. They were masoom. They had the ability. They had more knowledge. So if they didn't do it, it actually sort of almost guarantees it's not possible to do it. And if you think, and if I think that I'm smarter than our Aimma and the prophets, we could con the taghut and do a trick on them and be friendly, but then victory of Islam will come, then we are fooling ourselves and nothing more. And I think this is really this is when our nafs and shaitan gets in, and you need to sort of really think that either for those who believe that that's the way forward, they need to sit down and think that either what they're saying in reality, either ideologically our Aimma were wrong, or they weren't intelligent enough to do this, because there's no other third way on this.
Thank you. Very nice example. Well, unfortunately, at this point of time, on one side, we see different types of Islam being propagated. And on the other side, we see Islamophobia by the Western powers. And these are acting actually as two cutting edges of the same scissors, cutting in the same direction, hurting the authentic Islam. Dr. Shajareh, what would be your recommendation, your solution to this situation?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a very, very sort of close connection between Islamophobia and this creation and social engineering, a new form of Islam. It's sort of Islam that is it's sort of sympathetic to Taghut and wants to coexist with Taghut and have Taghut rule and be in power while they will just pray and fast at most. Now, the plan of Islamophobia is like a stick that is used against Muslims to demonize them, to sort of say that they're unacceptable and they have to change. And the social engineered Islam is actually the carrot, is the sweet. You know, that if you become a sort of socially Muslim or culturally Muslim, and you leave the main, you know, you leave your politics, leave your ideology to one side, just go in the corner of the house and pray and fast. And if you do that, then they promote you. I mean, we've got right now sort of members of parliament around the world, politicians that are Muslim, some of them even wore a scarf, and you know, we got the mayor of London who prays and so forth, but he goes and leads the sort of Prize Day, which is homosexuals coming in the street, or he sort of, when he became sort of mayor, the first people I went to see was the Israeli ambassador, and he promised that he will have a happy birthday Israel in London for the 70th birthday. So really that's sort of what the message here is. If you're authentic Muslim, then there's this stick of Islamophobia. You can't get a job, you can't get a position, you'll be always demonized, you know, you can't even wear a scarf to go to school and. But the minute you give in and you become just culturally Muslim or partially Muslim and leave the certain aspect of your deen, as Allah says, never do, then you become acceptable.
Thanks. We have seen the story of Salman Rushdie being stabbed some time ago, being the headline of the media for some time. I would like to ask your opinion, your point of view regards to this person, Salman Rushdie himself, the fatwa or hukum of Imam Khomeini and the surrounding stories.
Well, I was involved. I was an activist at the time of Rushdie affair, and as a matter of fact, I was involved with a number of people. Long before the fatwa, we were petitioning, we were collecting petitions on mosques and so forth for the publishers to stop publishing this, and indeed, even at that time, sort of Hindu advisors to the publishers and many others, people who weren't even Muslim, they told the publishers that this is dynamite. This is going to create such a havoc. This is going to create huge problem. But what I'm saying is, it wasn't the fact that it wasn't known how damaging, how destructive this whole thing will be. But no matter how much we tried reasoning that this thing is going to create huge problems, there was no one was listening, and it was published. There was demonstrations around the world, you know, and many people died in Pakistan, in other places, and then the fatwa came. And I personally think that fatwa calmed things down. Actually, what happens when the fatwa came, Rushdie went into hiding. Sort of the demonstrations sort of took a different form. You know, people were demonstrating, but it wasn't that much violence. It was controlled, the demonstration. Yes, people were burning a few books here and there in UK and so forth. And what happened at that time, and I'm trying to sort of go through it faster. What happened was, only in UK we had only two people. One of them a dentist, and the other one a scholar, who supported Salman Rushdie, and they became isolated even from all the mosques. I mean, I remember Zaki Badawi, Zaki Badawi coming to the central mosque and being chased out by the youth, and even one of the original sort of imams, because he sort of did not condemn Salman Rushdie, nobody wanted to pray behind him in Central Mosque. And this was the mosque which was run by the Saudi government and everything else. And really, no self-respecting Muslim and Islamic scholar anywhere around the world was able to come up and say that this fatwa, this hukum, is not right from Islamic perspective. Not a single one. So what eventually, after a lot of pressure by the Americans and the British government and the MI5, MI6 and the only thing that they come up with after a few years was the only way we could help Rushdie, and these are the sort of so-called scholars who wanted to help Rushdie, was for him to come and redo his shahada and become Muslim again, which he came and do it, and then a lot of his supporters started getting angry with him. What, you giving in, and so forth. So he actually lost the credibility on both sides. He didn't gain anything, and he lost the rest of it. Now, this is what I've just told you is factual, is actual fact. Now, the only thing comes is that this hukum, and it wasn't fatwa, this hukum, which was given by a very senior scholar who has got the authority of being a judge, and is given this hukum as a judicial judgment. Does it have jurisdiction for everywhere around the world, or it doesn't? From a legal framework, jurisdiction is not usually for everywhere in the world, and under international laws and so forth. So if a hukum, if a judicial decree is given in one part of the world, it will only have jurisdiction for implementation in areas that has got, and so therefore one could argue that it's got no jurisdiction for this to be done in Paris, London, New York, and so forth. And if somebody indeed does that, then they have to face the consequences of their action. And when you look at in practical sense, this is exactly what happened. Nobody went around implementing this. Even Iranian government at the time of Mr. Kharazi, gave assurances that we are not going to send somebody from Iran to kill him. And this did not happen. Now, the issue of jurisdiction, what has damaged the concept of jurisdiction regarding a hukum, a decree of a judge in one part of the world, or one decision from one part of the world in the rest of the world, is not because of what Muslims have done with Salman Rushdie. That undermining the jurisdiction is what the United States and the West have done in the rest of the world by using drones day in, day out, killing individuals without actually even making the accusation or announcing that there is a judgment on them, and then killing their family, and then killing their neighbors, to the extent that the Western powers have already admitted 75% of people who have died as a result of the drones are innocent. They're not, there was no intention of killing them. That's what they're saying. But I would put to you that 100% are innocent, because they were never taken to a court, never been accused of anything, never found guilty, never were told, they were told that they've been found guilty. They just went and killed them, you know? Then if you look at mass killings, like the sort of sanctions. Look, in Iraq alone, 500,000 children, 500,000 children, you can't find more innocent than children, were killed as a result of the sanction on Iraq to remove Saddam Hussein. And when Madeleine Albright was challenged on a program, on a media, and said, is that justifiable? To get rid of Saddam, you kill 500,000 innocent children? She said yes.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
And so who is undermining the international law over the issue of jurisdiction is not mullahs from Iran or from, you know, ayatollahs from Iran or anyone else. It's actually the West who is undermining and giving the message that you could, you know, even decide in the corner of your house to go and kill people and their family and their neighbors, or pass a decree to put a sanction, kill 500,000 people, and you don't have any international law on your side, but you do it because you're powerful and you could do it. So really what we have to do as human beings, we actually have to sort of accept that what is creating havoc on earth, and any action by any individual government to actually create these havoc needs to be challenged and stopped. Look, how many people were killed as a result of this in Afghanistan? And for what result? You know, they killed all these people, destroyed the whole infrastructure, and they went on and on. Even on the last day, they killed people, innocent people, which now they admit. And then they give it back to Taliban again. I mean, they stole all these things, which, you know, we can't have Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Okay, and then give it back to them. So they killed all these people for what? You know, and then no one have been found guilty. Innocent people have been killed. No one has been charged. You know, it's been legitimized in the world to do these killings. And so Israel goes and does killings every day. You know, everybody else goes killing. And if more nations go around doing the same thing, then we have an even greater injustice around the world. Why? Because we have made an abominable concept acceptable. We have made killing, in the Islamic term, we want to say halal, to go and destroy people's lives.
Well, at the end of your response, you mentioned the name of Israel. How do you see the role of Israel and Zionism in confronting the Iranian Revolution and Islam? one part of my question. And the second part would be the recent normalization that you observe. Some Arab leaders have started talking to Israel at a different level. How do you see this normalization? And let me also ask you a fantasy or imaginary question. What if Iran one day normalizes relations with Israel?
Yeah. Well, look, I think what we should look at this whole thing without any prejudices. I think those who try to bring prejudices in this evaluation are doing it because they haven't got any other option. They have no other defense. They cannot defend the undefensible. And the Zionists have been doing this for a very long time. It's a very basic concept here. We now know, it's been established, that Israel is not just an illegal occupier and a colonial outpost, but it's actually an apartheid system. It's been identified by almost all human rights organizations, including the Israeli ones. It's been identified by a number of senior members of UN and the special rapporteurs. And now it's really undisputable. In the same way that the apartheid system in South Africa was identified and it was very difficult to dispute it. But nevertheless, some did. You know, United States, Britain, and so forth, they not only they sort of accepted the apartheid nature of South Africa, but they supported it and they called the resistance in South Africa as terrorism. Nelson Mandela was identified by Margaret Thatcher and Reagan and others as a terrorist. In the same way that we are giving, the same labels to those who are fighting now the last apartheid system in the world, i.e. the resistance in Palestine and those who are in their support. Now, the fact of the matter is that once you are being identified, once we have identified an apartheid system, it brings a certain international law and obligation on all governments and all institutions to challenge it and to stop it and not to support it. This is not something you like it or you don't. This is not about I like my relationship with the Zionist state, so I will continue and so forth. This is actually an obligation under international law, and we need to make sure those who are supporting the state of Israel, the apartheid system, are actually going to rise up to that responsibility. But also we shouldn't hold our breath, because we know what happened in South Africa. We know that those who fail to stand up, they end up to be on the wrong side of history. And they eventually, all of them, lined up to invite Nelson Mandela and praise him and apologize and this and that. And I could assure you same thing is going to happen with the apartheid system in South Africa. So those who are actually going the wrong way because of their weaknesses, like these satellite sort of Arab states, they are going not because they want to move forward. They're going because they're weak, they have no self-confidence, and these are the people who are killing their own people, let alone being partly with the other killers. The fact is that there is no human right justice or anything. There is not even democracy over these look, these governments are actually throwing their own citizens out and removing their citizenships in Bahrain, Emirates. People are disappearing left, right, and center. Their own citizens. In Saudi Arabia, you know what they did to Khashoggi. What did they do to this student, a Saudi student in UK, who has used tweets to stand against, tweet against the Saudi government? He's got 36 years in prison. 36 years in prison? And then Saudi Arabia owns part of the tweet. It's unbelievable. You cannot come up with, fantasies like this. And so, if this is, if we are seeing who is party to support of Israel, you could see that these are the people who, at best, very weak, and worse, very evil. And they have got systems which bring injustice. United States hasn't got health care for its own citizen, but it actually supports the State of Israel to have health care for their citizen. It denies its own citizens from that, but he's doing that. We are seeing what is happening in Yemen. Who is on the side of murderers in Yemen? Who is on the side of murders in Palestine? And so it doesn't matter. You actually asked me a question. If Iran or anyone else change a position from standing for justice against the apartheid system and against illegal occupation and against brutal occupation which is killing men, women and children, if it removes support from this and goes to the other side, then it's as guilty as everyone else. It's as guilty actually under international law. Anyone who supports and creates an environment of war crime and human rights abuses, then they are as guilty as the ones who actually committing it. So it doesn't matter who does it. The history will show that those who didn't are going to be on the right side of the history, and those who didn't are going to be on the wrong side of the history. And you could oppress people, some of the people, so some of the time. You can't do it forever. Justice will come in the same way justice came in South Africa. Inshallah. Inshallah.
Masaf International Institute, uncovering the truth.